Welcome to episode 21. We are continuing with the flight of this as yet unnamed space shuttle into orbit. If you remember, the first flight of this did not go so well. Right before the SRB separated, we had some stability issues and the whole thing pancaked into a flat spin and we had to land it back next to the runway. But this one is going much better. We have these experiments in the cargo bay that we can open up and take measurements of the atmosphere. And we're just going to store those in there. So the way I've set this up is you can see I'm doing the thrust limiter on that KW rocketry engine, the one that is on the fuel tank and not on the orbiter itself. And that way we can manage the whole torque of this, because as the fuel is burned from the fuel tank, the center of mass will change. And there's a fuel tank on the orbiter itself, but the fuel tank is draining into the orbiter. So the center of mass is shifting upwards into or towards the actual plane part of the space plane. So we have to adjust the throttle control on that KW engine to keep the whole thing stable. And you can see as I'm playing with the settings here, we're getting some pitch oscillations. There are tools that can manage this technique of differential throttling, but I'm just doing it by hand because that's honestly a lot easier. And I don't really feel like getting mech jeb on this. So now, trying to combine my maneuvers. So we ditch the fuel tank, and then we'll have to circularize ourselves. We want to be in a pretty low orbit. I'm going to go for about 75 by 75. Right now it's about 75 by 85. So once we get to periapsis, I'll have to do a quick circularization, and then we'll be going in a lower orbit, and we'll be able to catch up much quicker to the space station. So, blue the solar panels, all of that stuff. And here I'm just using the monopropellant to try to kill off the inclination between our orbits. And we warp down to the periapsis and line up with retrograde and just circularize really quickly. And then we can just follow through until we get pretty close to the space station. And then we start plotting out our maneuver to actually rendezvous and come close to it. Which, once we complete that and we do a bunch of tweaking of maneuver nodes, 26 meters per second, that's not too bad. And we can actually see it there already. We're within the 100-kilometer mark, and the space station is resolved as a dot, at least until we come into the night side of the planet here. So warp ahead until we actually reach the maneuver node, at which point we will do a quick burn just to bring ourselves up into an intersecting orbit with the space station, with the Skylab. From that point we can refine our encounter down. Right now it's about 1.9-ish kilometers. That'll be good enough. We can refine it from there. And then we warp until we are nice and close, 15 kilometers away. And now I'm using the intersect distance given in the bottom left there. I'm just burning RCS randomly until we can actually, until we get it close. 400 meters, it's pretty good. We're coming a little bit quickly though. So I point along the velocity vector and I use some of the RCS fuel to slow down. Really, the wise thing to do would be to burn off the liquid fuel that I have. You can see I have 1.3 kilometers per second in a small tank in the back there. Which, you know, because it's so far back, may cause stability issues on re-entry. But it doesn't really occur to me to do that until later. So now just slowing down and keeping our encounter distance pretty close. Continuing to warp in, we're going about 12 meters per second relative to the space station. And at this point, yeah, I realize, you know, that's a little bit fast, probably faster than the RCS can handle. So turn the thing around and fire the engines along that vector, simultaneously slowing us down and also bringing our trajectory closer and closer to the station. 50 meters away, that's a pretty good encounter. And now we just finish getting in close, and we have a neat little trick here for actually docking with this. Yeah, we'll go to that now. Okay, now that we're close enough, you may be wondering, there are no docking ports that are visible on here, and yet in order to do a life support transfer, we in fact need to dock. But the eagle-eyed among you will notice we have this thing folded up in here. And just conveniently is a robotic arm And we can extend it out very slowly, but very surely. And on the end of that arm, there is a docking port. And we will use that to extend the reach of this because we have solar panels, we have wingtips and other things that would be pretty bad to knock into a space station. So instead, we can use this arm, and it will help us with our attempts in docking. It'll extend our reach. It'll allow us to, really get up in there. And that way we can actually properly dock with the thing. So once this has fully extended, I'm going to control from that docking port, and then we'll be able to line it up using the docking align indicator. I've been careful to position the docking port as close to the center of mass of this thing as possible. So the center of mass should be in this area, which means we'll be able to do rotational corrections and all sorts of things without too severely messing up the rotation of this all, as well as doing some RCS control and translation. So that shouldn't interfere with it all that much. But just folding it out here, these first ones have in fact folded out all the way, and we now have this second group extending and hinging, and those lights inside are also attached to the side of the docking port there, which, are not particularly useful per se in a space environment, but they're, they look nice. They're cool additions to have. So now the Extenditron has almost fully extended, and we still have got a lot of rotation left on the Pivotron. So just waiting for that to get all the way done there. In the meantime, we are slowly sliding towards the station. We're going for this top docking port here. And pretty soon we will have reached full extension once this number reaches 180 here. Just a few more degrees to go. So I'm going to bring up my docking alignment indicator. And there we go. Take that away, and now control from here. And what we'll be able to do is point this so that it is aligned with the docking port. Does not seem to fully be understanding which port I have selected here. Although it is possible I actually just picked the wrong port. Let's get in here. Yep, I have picked the wrong port. So instead I want, there should be one on the top here. That one. Set as target. And now, okay. Point the rest of the way. So now getting this marker lined up. And something occurs to me. Oh, this is the right one. Never mind. So we get ourselves lined up with that correct docking port there. And now it's just a matter of lining everything up. So in the spaceplane hangar, I was very careful to make all of the center of mass be as close to this arm as possible so that any rotations I apply happen in a way that does not torque the whole thing in a weird way when I'm controlling about this point. So translational control is very easy, and it was important to get lined up early on so that way any kind of rotation that way would have produced some drastic changes. But this is pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and we get lined up very, very easily. Now we can just follow this thing through to the actual docking with the vessel. The last few meters now. We are going pretty quickly. Of course, the space shuttle, when it was docking, was going at a much slower pace because both it and the space station were particularly heavy objects, and so docking at any kind of speed would produce a pretty big jolt inside that would be, I imagine, uncomfortable to go through. as well as, risking damaging some things with vibrations, stuff like that. But we don't have to worry about that. We just have to worry about keeping ourselves lined up. Although I do want to come in nice and slow here. So kill off that last bit of speed just before contact. Keep ourselves lined up. And we have docked. Wow, look at that. That is really something to behold there. So now what we can do is, well, the first thing we have to do is oxygen, clean water, and food. So now, at first I try to transfer everything all at once, or all of the food. And you can see the food container that is the emptiest on the space station. So at first I just try draining it out of there, but that takes a very long time. And it actually goes a lot faster if we do things one by one here. So now time for clean water, except we have scrubbers and filters on the station, so not a lot has been used. So that is all fine. And now for the oxygen, that has been used, but in smaller amounts because we have some scrubbers. And so we transfer all of that. And now that we've brought all the life support onto the station, it's time to take the waste off once we finish that last oxygen transfer. So we have a bunch of waste canisters in the cargo bay there, and at first I transfer into one of those, except there's about 8 of those, and that would take a very long time. And once that one fills up, in a moment, just transferring all the waste into it, I realized shortly that I actually have this large container here, which transfers everything much quicker. So we start that, and then we just time warp through. And now our life support transfer is completed. Now that we have finally completed that resource transfer, we can undock. And right away we will pull away from the station here. And we can start to fold in the docking arm there, which will be a slow and tedious process. But we have now transferred as much of our life support as we can really get out of the shuttle onto the station. So now on here, we've still got a lot of food left, but the space station now has much longer to go. And we are also carrying some of that waste back home with us. And that way we can, open up the space for some more crew and things like that. And in the future we will have to make some expansions to the station just to, really get it up to its full capacity. In the meantime, why don't we actually take a look at these guys in the lab. So they have been researching. They've probably been, gathered a lot of science. So we're going to actually go ahead and transmit that back. The things that they have gotten so far. We can also level up our crew. They're on level 1. So we have transmitted that data back. And it has gone home, given us even more science to work with. And in the meantime, this crew, we can start to think about going home. I think we're going to wait for the Space Center to come into the sunlight before we actually, before we really go into a landing approach. So now we just give ourselves a push away from the station. We can unset it as our target. And we just slowly drift away. Although actually we do need to let this arm continue folding in. So we can just physics warp. Allow that to fold itself in, and that way it will be stowed safely for re-entry. Let it all run down to 0. And now that it's stowed, we can safely physics warp away, or time accelerate away. Watch the station drifting away behind us. And it will soon disappear, and there goes the sun. Now it's time to figure out how to re-enter this thing. This has never been through a re-entry test, but, first time for everything. So we just wait until the space station is first in the day, because I want to come down in the daytime. It's nice to be able to see where I'm landing. So we wait until sunrise hits the space center, and then I end up overshooting a little. So I have to point downwards to bring my periapsis backwards so that it is someplace above or before the space center actually occurs. We're also in an inclined orbit, so we'll have to do some aggressive turning to actually line ourselves up and get on a course with the runway. But it's not too much, so it shouldn't be too bad. And yeah, then we just fold everything away. Now, do note that we are on a mostly full tank of fuel, which brings our center of mass very far back. The center of mass is actually around the joint where the docking arm intersects with the actual payload, the fairing there, which means our center of mass is very far backwards, and this thing is going to be unstable. Of course, I've never actually tested this thing on an empty or on a full fuel tank, and all the simulations I did were for it being empty. But we're at a high enough point, and the RCS and torque are strong enough that it's not really a concern at this altitude. You can see I'm getting some large AOA, large angle of attack and side slip warnings. And yeah, this thing is responding very poorly. I pitch it down and it just wants to, any small deviations, yeah, you can see I'm basically going vertical now. I managed to get it back under control, but any small deviations just want to kind of grow into a big, crazy pancake really quickly. And we've still got a long way to go. So I tried pumping some monoprop forward, and yeah, we're pancaking again. And now we're just flying completely backwards. So I throttle up to try to get some of the engine control and burn some of the mass, which works. Except now we're going pretty slow. We've still got a long range to go in this as well. And we have to go north. So I start doing a small turn to try to bring my trajectory more northwards, so that way we can actually intersect with the space center. Keeping it gentle here. And you can see how it is just kind of resting in this orientation. And yeah, now we just completely lose it. Spinning all over the place. And we've lost about 600 meters per second, 700 meters per second of speed there, which in other circumstances would be a good thing, except we have a very long distance to actually fly. So I throttle up and deploy the air brakes because I want to mostly just maintain a similar speed to this, but also burn off all of the fuel that I can. And we're flipping around all over the place again. So get the thing under control, light up the engines, and get ourselves back up to about 1,200 meters per second, thereabouts. Which, we're still getting some substantial heating at this altitude and at this speed, but it is burning away our fuel, and the added torque of the engines is keeping us stable. And as we burn off that fuel, our center of mass moves forward, and so we gain greater control authority. Until eventually you can see on the horizon there, that is the continent that has the space center. So we do need to keep going there. We do need to actually make it to that point. So I keep the engines on for a good bit longer until we are in a regime where we would normally be gliding. And now we just cover some more distance. We're back up to 30 kilometers altitude. And at this point, I realize we're pretty far south, so we need to start going north. So we start doing a turn, and you can already tell that this thing is restoring itself back into the velocity vector, which is good. That is a good indication for the stability of this. So now just doing a few more turns and pitching maneuvers to try to kill off that speed, looking at all the things in the sky there. And coming over the mountains, I think we're doing just fine. We are going pretty fast, so do a little bit more maneuvers, do some of the air brakes, and a few more turns to get ourselves back mostly in line with the runway. Of course, we're going to refine our approach as we get closer. Flying another turn, pulling a couple of G's in there just to bleed off that last bit of speed. We're going rather fast, so put out the air brakes for a while just to bring our speed down to a more manageable level. I want to land about 100 meters per second, and at this speed I think I'd be landing supersonic. And as we go lower, we of course bleed off even more speed, where you can see the high dynamic pressure warning there. So I do the air brakes, bring ourselves back down. Now we are below the speed of sound. And you can see the runway just there through the window of the cockpit, which doesn't have great visibility. Quick bursts of the engines there just to keep our speed good, burn off a little more fuel. And yeah, now we can just speed our way down, doing some more air brakes because we are coming in pretty quickly. Gear down, and then some more air brakes, just slowing ourselves down, managing that speed until we can get right up into the runway. And this is looking to be a pretty good approach, although we are going still a bit fast, and our vertical speed is pretty large. You can see we're going about 20 meters per second downwards, and I'll have to kill all of that pretty quickly when we get to the runway. So now starting to flare a little bit early just to make our descent a little bit more manageable. But other than that, this is a pretty good approach. Killing a little bit more of that last speed there. Keeping ourselves lined up with the runway. Agaden and Stefrid? I can't read the name. Okay, now everything is loading. I might have to actually move that power station further away so it's not interfering with the landings like this. And now flare. Come on, keep it nice and gentle. Flare and bouncing a little bit. Okay. Just keep it pointed down the runway. Drogue chutes are not coming out, and we're going sideways. Okay, keep it straight. Come on. And okay, this thing really wants to go to the side. All right, keep it together. Don't break. And there go the drogues, and now we're high up, of course. Coming back down. Okay. And bouncing on the nose a little bit, but I think we are good now. All right. Well, still got a few tweaks to make to this vehicle design, and we need to come up with a name for it, but that will be in future episodes. Until next time.